Alright, so today I'm going to be doing a little bit of project management for Lorepub. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to start. I highly doubt I'll be able to finish. It's already fairly late. But I'm going to start reviewing Stephen Kochan's Programming in C. Should be 4th edition. Let me find a more official page for this. I managed to get the PDF from the Pearson site. Inform IT site, whatever. So, whoa, forgot that was broken. Yeah, okay. So, this is the, yeah, nice watermark, guys. This is the PDF I got from Inform IT. I think Inform IT is just a mark of Pearson. Pretty sure. Yeah, subsidiary of Pearson Education. There we go. Oh, not the 3rd edition. The 4th edition. Yeah, 4th edition. Anyway. But first I need to was another issue you wanted me to look at. You wanted to look at 17. Unfortunately not. Hey, Taxi's here. Hi. Taxi said, "Hey yo, how's it going?" It's going pretty good. I see you. So what I'm doing right now is I'm basically just explaining some stuff for David, the designer I work with. And I'm just getting him caught up on what's changed in the last couple months I've been working on the app, and getting him to where he needs to get in order to be able to test the app and get some front-end work done. What I'm doing at this very moment is I'm going to try to remind myself how I dump and recreate the database so that I can tell him. Ooh, people are talking. How's that for ad hoc documentation? Cool part is, if anybody else ever wants to know how to do this again, I can just link this comment. Okay. David might want to know more stuff, but it's pretty late in his neck of the woods, so he's not going to be able to tell me I'm missing anything. Accordingly, probably going to call it. No, wait, I'm going to do one more thing. While I'm here, library. Yeah, I know. Okay, I think I'm done with that. Let's talk books. People keep asking me, what do you still learn in C? So I bought a book. It's supposed to be good, but I haven't really reviewed it before. It's this book. It's Stephen Kochan's? Not really certain how to pronounce that. Sorry, Stephen. Programming in C, 4th edition. Seems like it's used at some universities. Here's what the interior looks like. Not that you'll necessarily be able to see it super well, but you know. MSRP is like 50, but you can buy it from the publisher for 40, and the ebook's like 35. So I don't really know who that MSRP is for. I'm guessing Barnes & Noble? I don't really know. Anyway. So... Dodge. So... let's see, that's fine now. So yeah, I wanna review this book. I'm gonna use the ebook to do this so you can actually see what I'm looking at. That whole deal. So this might seem petty to some people, but a couple things stand out to me. And keep in mind, I bought this from Inform IT, which is a subsidiary of the publisher of this book. This isn't a third party. So they produce this PDF, not somebody they licensed it out to. So yeah, again, this is going to seem a little bit petty, but a couple things. They put a watermark on it, and they got my name wrong. And I don't know how, because my name in my account is definitely first name Christopher, last name Alan. I don't know how they doubled up my first name, but yeah. And what makes it extra annoying is they put the watermark, you know, naturally, admittedly, but they put it on every single page. So they have my name wrong on every single page of this PDF, over and over and over, for over 500 pages. Christopher Allen, Christopher Allen, Christopher. You see how annoying that is? Yeah, I'm expected to go through 500 pages of my name being fucking wrong. So, okay, let's, I don't know how well this is going to come up, how well you're going to be able to see this for my screen share, but I'm going to zoom in here. And do you notice anything? Does anything stand out to you? Now, again, you might not be able to see it unless you like full screen your the video, but that right there, that's JPEG artifacts. Oh, artifacts. Yeah. Yeah, that's JPEG artifacts. They didn't use proper vector assets in the cover. It's a badly compressed JPEG they inserted into the PDF. So, what's the alternative look like? Well, here's our book. We made this with, well, I shouldn't say we, David, the person I was writing stuff up for earlier, he made this cover. And he uses SVG, which is a vector graphics format. So when I zoom into this one, you'll notice it stays sharp and clean, right? Sharp and clean, artifacty and gross. People don't pay the fuck attention to quality, man. It drives me crazy. All right, so yeah, just kind of unprofessional, you know? Anyway, I'll note that the print version cover looks fine. It looks like they used a proper 300 dpi render of whatever the cover is in, probably they did it in InDesign or something. I don't know, like, if I hold it up close, I don't know if it's going to be sharp for you, but yeah, it's standard printing quality. So, I don't know what happened there. Okay, let's move on. So, let me see here. Quick note, do not buy that Prada book. Do not. Get the Barbara Moo and all those people book. The one that's just called C++ Primer. That's a much better C++ book. Okay. Let me see here. It's the typical fucking sans serif font everybody uses. For my mother and father. It's pretty funny. They didn't even make it so that the watermark would have a transparent background. So it just whites out whatever it sits on top of, it looks like. Yeah. That's cool. Alright. Actually, does it do that on the cover too? Yeah, it's white on the cover's white background, so it doesn't matter. Okay. And then, okay, so another thing. Alright. So you'll notice, if I bring up the Haskell book here, if I click on a section in here, like, let me scroll down the contents. Okay, so I see lists are polymorphic, and I'm curious about that. And I'm going to click it. And it takes me not only to that page, events actually takes me to the section, right? Precisely. All right. Oh. Okay. They're not links. Nothing here is a link. It's all text. It's just dumb text. So it turns out you can actually generate PDFs that understand links. You know, internal links to other parts of the document. They actually do fine at it. It's one of the purposes of a PDF, actually, is that it's like a better text format. I appreciate a lot of people don't like PDFs, but if you actually generate them right, they're really nice. I mean, if I want to go to like chapter 5, making decisions, I mean, what can I do here? Can I just like go to the page directly, I guess? I mean, unfortunately, I have the index, but the index is generated by events, right? If I was reading this on an e-reader and I didn't have access to an easy index or whatever other reason, like the table of contents should just be clickable. Like I don't understand not just doing that the right way. Oh, this one's clickable. This one's clickable. But the other one isn't. So this is contents at a glance, not clickable. Full table of contents with sections, clickable. Why? There's not even that many sections per chapter. Why even have the first thing? We have way more sections per chapter and we didn't bother. Yeah, we have way more sections per chapter. Doesn't really matter. I mean, I guess it makes it harder for somebody, like... I wouldn't even say harder. Like, it might be a little bit more intimidating looking to somebody leafing through it in a store, but... Ugh. Alright. He's done Objective C. I did see his Unix books. Alright. Introduction. Okay, so he mentions Dennis Ritchie here. I'm going to go ahead and comment on Kernighan and Ritchie. So everybody recommends KNR. Kernighan and Ritchie. Generally, they mean the second edition. I don't think I've read anybody who actually thinks you should read the first edition. The problem is that the second edition is still way too old. One of the problems is that what makes C difficult is, in my opinion, almost none of what the book covers, except for maybe just the bare bones basics of pointers. So, Dustin, I'm not gonna, I can't do that right now. I'm streaming. I'm not gonna look at random other books. I want to focus on reviewing the C book. I've looked at the Git programming with Haskell book before. Alright, so a lot of people recommend it because it's relatively compact and it has some exercises and it's, you know, it's a pretty well written book. The problem is it was just written for a different time and different needs. the Kernighan and Ritchie book was essentially you're writing C code that uses your operating system as a garbage collector, really. Like, you're not really learning how to manage memory properly and remembering to free everything and all that. Like, you're just letting, the process exit, clean up process be your garbage collector. That's fine for, like, short-lived little programs, but managing memory properly is really most of what makes C difficult, and much of the way C gets used today is either, FFI from a long-running server processor daemon, or the whole thing itself is some kind of server processor daemon. Like, a lot of our processes and programs these days are just these persistent services. They're not little utilities that get manually invoked by a human or by cron jobs or whatever else. That stuff happens, but, you just can't really get away with that. So, between that and the fact that the book was really written in a very... It's running on a somewhat casual explanation of C, and that's not really good enough. C hurts. You'll get it wrong a lot, and if you don't internalize the standard and the rules of the language, you'll just keep getting stuff wrong. The other thing, in my opinion, that makes C difficult to learn is the idioms that get layered on top of the language. And by, the K&R book doesn't cover that either, That's not really a fault of the book in the sense of it being some kind of author error. It's just a book from a different time. But you're really better off getting a newer book. I don't say it's a waste of money to buy the K&R book. It's perfectly fine to get it, work through it, all that. But you are far from done if you do. If nothing else, it's worth working through just to appreciate the style in which it's written. It's a nice kind of like light, kind of classic technical book style. It's kind of neat. Anyway. But, this is my biases and preferences. I embarked on a project that eventually resulted, with my co-author in a 1,200-page book, depending on the format. I'd rather something be more complete and comprehensive than not. And the problem is that C is hard enough to learn and K&R doesn't go quite far enough that a lot of people just end up kind of adrift. After they finish K&R, they don't really know where to go or what to learn after that. I have some ideas about that, but I haven't really taught C in 8 years. So, yeah. And I basically never use it, so I barely remember C myself. I only know, how to read the standard and very slowly and carefully interpret some code. I'm not really fluent in the language anymore. If I ever was. So back to this programming in C book. We're in chapter 1 now, some fundamentals. Sorry, I'm looking at the typesetting. Let me get to a comparable section here. So this is another preference thing, but I'm not really a fan of the fonts that most tech publishers use. This one's a bit better than most of them. I'd like something with a slightly deeper weight, heavier weight, like this Baskerville we use in Haskell book, but it's okay. Mostly, the reason I'm saying that is because they have a lot of text on their pages, and if you look, the screen version of the Haskell book, we actually give it pretty generous margins. And there's a few reasons we do that. One of them is actually, one of the core components of readability is how many characters you have in a single line. And that's pushing it. It's doable. It's more doable on in a print format, but especially for electronic reading, it's not good to do that. It's better to get it down. And when people talk about the page count, they don't remember that we didn't format the book to minimize page count. We formatted the book for readability, and formatting the book for readability means that we're going to use narrower. I used a narrower body for the text to make it easier to read, easier on the eyes, and that inflated the page count. That's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want the book to seem any more intimidating than it actually was or anything, but that's just the name of the game. So what's doubly annoying here is, let me bring up this chapter here. Yep, I was right. So, if you look, yep, yeah, that's what I kind of suspected. So this PDF is essentially their print. And you can see it, like, in the PDF, it goes, understand before you can, in a higher level, developed in at the end of each line, and it does the same thing here. So this PDF they've shipped you isn't really optimized for your use as an actual electronic format. I'm actually kind of surprised because I saw people are commenting on this in the chat, and it's a really good point. So they have overflow on the right side. I wouldn't really call it overflow. That's intentional. They've chosen to left justify the text instead of doing a proper layout like this, where it's typeset more like a traditional book instead of a ragged right. So what's surprising about this is I kind of expect something that low quality in an ebook. Like, a lot of places will do that kind of thing. But it's ragged right in the print version too. It's kind of surprising. That's like, you know, Babby's first ebook kind of thing. I'm surprised they're willing to, like, do that. That's alright. That's a choice. Alright. So, not a fan of that. The lines are too long, which makes the ragged right even more annoying. Like, if they had ragged right and they were trying to, maybe they had done it to make things a little bit easier for the layout engine so that they could do a narrower layout, I would understand. In order to get the layout to work in the Haskell book, I had to rewrite every single code example that went over 43 columns to be down to 43 columns, so that the ebook, the e-reader version of the PDF would work on a Kindle and not overflow. I did all that manually. Turns out, apparently I was wasting my time. Apparently big publishers like Pearson don't even bother to use a proper layout algorithm for their paragraphs. So, if I'd known that, could have saved myself some fucking time. God. Yeah, you know, like, it's ragged right, and they're still hyphenating. They're still hyphenating. Like, why is this, seriously, why is this hyphenated? It hyphenated particular, right? L-A-R. L-A-R. U-P, development, M-E-N-T-L-A-R. L-A-R is narrower than M-E-N-T. Why did it hyphenate particular? That's fucking dumb. I mean, my text here in Haskell book has less hyphenation, and it has a much narrower prose size, the body size. So it should be hyphenating more, but it doesn't, because the layout algorithm isn't garbage. This has to be like Adobe InDesign. Like, somebody just copy and pasting from a Word document into InDesign. That has to be what this is. I've seen this before. I thought Adobe InDesign had a layout algorithm, though. I could have sworn. Did they just, like, forget to hit a button? Like, what is this? Okay. So, the book talks about programming, higher level languages. I think it's kind of funny the book thinks it needs to explain programming. I mean, it's fair enough. It's just, you know, like, I mean, is this anything the Wikipedia article doesn't have? Actually. Computer programming. Okay. Process that leads from an original formulation of a computing problem to executable computer programs. Programming involves activities such as analysis, developing understanding, generating algorithms, verification. Wow, they're talking about all the interesting stuff. No, programming for most people is taking JSON or database records and turning them into HTML. That's most of it for most people. All right. Very dumb machines, operations at primitive level, in terms of the instructions of the particular computer. Collection of instructions solves a certain problem. Okay. Algorithm. Test the numbers even or odd. Okay, that's boring. High-level languages. Technological software advanced in the development of assembly languages. Yeah. Fortran. Operating system. So, let me explain my objection to these little sections. Like, I think they're kind of inoffensive, but I don't think it's a very brave thing to do. You know? I mean, like, why? It's a book on C, you know? This isn't automate the boring things with Python. Like, if I'm reading automate the boring things with Python, and the author includes a few paragraphs on what programming is and maybe clears up some misconceptions people who've never programmed before might have about programming, that's fine. But most of the people doing this have programmed at least a little bit before, even if it was just like their CS 101 or 110 class, and they're going to know what programming is. You know, this feels like a definition of terms section that got bloated. Like, really what they're trying to do here, if you look at what they did italics on: instruction set, program, algorithm. This is definition of terms. So, okay, fine. Like, in the book, we just do definitions at the end of the chapter if we want them to understand what a specific definition means. You don't need to bloat it out into like a multi-paragraph thing, and also, like, this is very basic. This is a petty point, I know. I'm sorry. But I don't feel like somebody's going to read this at the very beginning of the book and get anything out of it. And another problem I have here is the author is not explaining what relevance any of this has to C. He cites the example of Fortran and says nothing about the history of C. Nothing. Now, he starts getting closer with operating systems because he talks about Unix and Bell laboratories, which is very related to the history of C. Never actually mentions it other than Unix was written primarily in the C language, but doesn't really tie it to anything else that he said earlier. It doesn't explain any of the motivations for using C, how it compares with other languages these days. Jump straight into compiling programs with GCC. So, again, like, another problem I have with this is the unevenness, you know? If somebody leads in like this, I expect them, you know, they're telling me, I'm going to build a cabin out of toothpicks. A human inhabitable cabin. We're going to build all the way up. And I'm like, okay, kind of boring for me, but I get what you're going for. And we're compiling now. You got to choose a consistent level of detail and pace, you know? Like, just pick a cadence and stick with it. Don't like, I bet you an editor made him do this. I bet it was some fucking obnoxious editor or or like not even like the editor that worked on this book, like a chief editor or some person like that, some fucking functionary made him do this because they felt like, students are being made to buy this book. We better explain to people who've already put down tens of thousands of dollars on taking a CS course what programming is. Yeah. Okay. So we're on GCC now. Bothers to explain what a compiler is. So another objection I have to this, and you can decide how you feel about this, but we try to, in the book, we try to define terms that might be a little bit hard for people to find a single clear definition of. So for example, our definition of polymorphism here in the Haskell book, that is a definition specific to Haskell. It is not a general definition of polymorphism qua programming languages. It is a definition of polymorphism that is more useful to somebody who's trying to understand what it means in the context of Haskell. These are just Wikipedia definitions. There's no point. Like, why would your reader buy a $40 book and then be just refused to Wikipedia something if they don't know a term? I don't get it. I understand the writing style and mindset that produces this, but I find it kind of annoying. It's a pet peeve. The program that is to be compiled is first typed into a file on the computer system. Again, like, lots of weird detail that isn't useful, doesn't bother to define anything else. So first off, it's not really a file in the computer system. Generally speaking, software projects exist in like a specific like hierarchical directory hierarchy. Almost everything is built that way, at least traditional systems. There are some exceptions like, Visual Studio and things like that. They have a mixture of custom metadata and hierarchical directories, but they don't bother to explain how those things are structured or what they look like, which, you don't have to do. You don't have to get into all that in the first chapter before they've even seen anything, right? But then why even bother to say, like, the program that is to be compiled is first type? What? And Taxi raises a great point. What kind of file? They don't even explain that it's just a text file. Most non-programmers, they've used Notepad or something like that. They know what a text file is. You don't have to talk down to them. My mother has basically never programmed, and she knows what a text file is and how software is written from that level. She knows it's me writing things in text files, Why can't you just say that? Computer installations have various... Computer installations! Wow! That sounds like something from GoldenEye. Computer installation. Does it have a satellite uplink that it talks to? Like... What is a computer installation? I've been programming for 2 decades and I don't know what that means. I'm guessing he means an operating system? He has an operating system section here. He bothered to define operating system. He doesn't use the term down here, though. Like, you read this section. If you're a new person, you don't know what he's talking about, you read this section for nothing. He wasted your fucking time because he's just going to use a different term that confuses a new person anyway. Don't change words if you go to the trouble of defining something that describes it fine. All right. And really, he's not even talking about operating systems per se. Kind of is. It's complicated. I mean, the rules on how files are named is kind of a cooperation between an operating system / kernel and a file system, basically. But he doesn't say any of those things. Of course, citing file system, conventions for naming files would sound, that was a redundant, tautological, but, still. C programs can typically be given a name provided the last 2 characters are .c. Okay, let's go to the next problem. So he's assuming that these people need to be told all of this other stuff, right? He's assuming you need to be told all this. And he says C programs are typically given any name provided the last 2 characters are .c. He doesn't say file extension. He never says that it's a file extension if the dot is special. He doesn't explain that operating systems will handle files with different file extensions specially. You know, like .exe being a program you can run versus .c, which is just a text file that's meant to be treated specially. He still hasn't told you it's a text file. He just says it's a file. So the name prog1.c might be a valid file name for a C program in your system. Okay. A text editor is usually used to enter the C program into a file. Okay, so the usually here is not helpful because it's going to make people wonder, well, what's the exception to the rule? And ignoring some kind of heroic system administrator writing C code onto a hard drive with a magnetic needle, like everything that is used to interact with a C program is a text editor. It could be a standalone text editor, it could be a text editor in a larger tool like an IDE, but the distinction means nothing to a newbie. So if you're bothering to explain this, you don't need to say usually. It's always a text editor, it's just sometimes the text editor is embedded in something else. I mean, it's like saying you usually write your emails in a text editor. Kind of. It's flipped around, kind of, but you're always writing emails like in text for the most part. Like very few people are going to fire up Adobe Dreamweaver to make, and even that's kind of a text editor, you know? It's weird. Vim is a popular text editor. Yeah, point the new people towards that. Nice. So let me explain the contrast here. So one of the books I recommend to people for learning C, especially if they're new to programming, is Zed Shaw's Learn C the Hard Way. And, you know, it's, in my opinion, it's really like, it's a better Kandar, in my opinion. But one of the specific things I want to cite here is when Zed tells you like how to get going with C, he doesn't do all this stupid bullshit. He explains the stuff that you might actually not know, and he gives you instructions and suggestions that are actually helpful. So for example, he doesn't tell you to use Vim or Emacs. He says, hey, here's, you know, gedit or Sublime Text or some like relatively normal text editor that a normal person could use right out of the box without having to like look up a fucking tutorial or something, you know, or keep like a cheat sheet next to the monitor. He tells them, you know, what they need to actually get going with learning the thing they wanted to learn. This is about respect and trust. So the problem is when you're a teacher, you need to respect the learner's time, and you need to earn their trust, deserve their trust. Now, the respect part is, if somebody comes to me and says, I want to learn C, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to divert them into learning Linux, Emacs, Vim, NixOS. That's not what they asked for. They said they wanted to learn C. I'm going to try to find them the shortest, easiest path to learning the thing they actually want to learn. It is extremely disrespectful to push your preferred tools on people like that who are trusting you, going back to the trust part, trusting you to give them sound advice of what's actually necessary for what they said their priorities were, not what your priorities are. When programmers do this, it makes me positively incandescent. I hate that. Respect their wishes. If they're going to use Windows, just leave them the fuck alone. If you don't know how to help somebody with compiling a C program in Windows, don't talk to them. Let somebody who actually knows what they're talking about help them. Or fire up a VM of Windows and see if you can figure it out and help them out. But don't do that. All right. So yeah, I think Zed Shaw's Learn C the Hard Way is a pretty good introduction for people who are new to programming or want just like a more modern kind of Kernighan and Ritchie. Program is entered in the files known as the source program. Not popularly. Not anymore. We really just call it source code now. We don't say it's singularly the source program. And I think part of the reason, and this is actually kind of funny, part of the reason we don't call it source program is because it's not actually, what the bits you wrote aren't the entire program. You include things. You include libraries and stuff more often than not, right? So like that's actually part of the source code too. So I don't know if I've ever actually heard anybody call it a source program. I don't think I've ever heard an actual programmer say that before. Maybe I have and I don't remember, but it's definitely uncommon either way. That's really weird. This is like, this book and the way it uses terms, this is like learning Cockney rhyming slang because you want to go to America and be understood as an American speaking American English. Like, this is really weird. Probably he's a graybeard and has been closed up in a den somewhere for 3 tens of years. Anyway, original form of the program expressed in the C language. I mean, again, like, if you put on your newbie hat here, what does this mean? The program that is entered into the file. So one thing you can do to improve the sentence right now is just replace entered, which a newbie might mistake for, jargon, like special thing. It's typed. You typed it into the text file. You typed text. That's it. What the fuck? Like, did this have an editor? Was the editor something other than Microsoft Word spell check? Like, who reviewed this? I'm not saying there are problems in the Haskell book, but come on. All right. Is known as the source program? Yeah, it's useless because it represents the original form. Again, this makes it sound like way more special than it actually is. You're just going to have newbies staring at this, puzzling about what the fuck he's talking about when there's really, like, there's no there. There's nothing, no deeper meaning to be understood. He's just saying simple things in a really obtuse way. After the source program has been entered into a file, typed. Sorry, I'm not trying to clip the mic. Typed. Text file. It's just text. You can then proceed to have it compiled. Wow. I bet this guy likes the passive voice. That's neat. Yeah. You just, command the computer to... You can then compile it. You can compile the program. Proceed to have it compiled. Okay. The compilation process is initiated by... Typing a special command on the... Okay. So, I'm going to have to just start skipping shit at this point because I can't, like... If I fisk this, I'm never going to get to any actual code. Yalpelfee said, I feel like 80% of tech books are like this. Yeah, unfortunately they are. If they weren't, I probably wouldn't have needed to write a book. Okay, let's talk about this sentence. Compilation process is initiated by. Okay, that is obnoxious. Just say, you compile a program by. Right? Alright, then it says, a special command in the system. Again, this is newbie bait. They're going to circle the drain trying to figure out what the fuck he means by special command on the system. So first off, the preposition on the system has no real meaning here. I know what he actually means. A newbie would never suss it out. What he means really is like a command line prompt or a terminal. That's not really on the system. That's not... No newbie knows, like, system means terminal. No programmer calls a terminal or command prompt system. System's just system. Computer system. System. It's just system. No relationship to what he's actually talking about. Then there's the fact that special has nothing to do with what the newbie would think the system is, which is like operating system, because the last time he said system was operating system, right? So you're going to think he's talking about like operating system. Command line prompts and terminals aren't really special with respect to the operating system. They aren't like deeper. They're just a different interface. Sometimes they offer you more options than a GUI, but that's because they're cheaper to make. It's not because they're special. So it's not a special command. It's just a command in a terminal. That's it. It's just a textual command like you would have done on DOS. Like, it's the same kind of command. You ever like use a DOS computer to play a video game? And you put the floppy in, and you moved over to the floppy drive letter, and then you said, hey, let's run the Star Wars game on the DOS computer. Same kind of command as what he's talking about. That's not special. That's just running a program from a command line, like textual interface. That's it. Okay. When this command is entered, the name of the file that contains the source program must also be specified. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Fine, whatever. So then he says, typing the line gcc prog1.c has the effect of the way this guy writes has the effect of initiating the compilation process with the source program contained in. Okay, so I have another problem with this. If you're going to bother showing them this command, why don't you just give them something to type in? If you look at Kernighan and Ritchie or Zed Shaw's book, they just give you the classic Hello World example, and they say, here's what you need to type in, give it this file name, and, you know, from a terminal or something in the same directories where you save this text file, run this command. And you'll compile that program you wrote into a binary. Why not just go straight to that? You have to do some setup, like some people are going to get stuck on using the terminal, they're going to get stuck on changing into the directory that they, you know, save the text file in. There's stuff people can get stuck on. I'm not saying it's necessarily easy, but he could spend all this time that he's wasting on this brain torture and just turn it into an actual useful tutorial, which I think Zed Shaw's book does a better job of. And instead of showing us how to just write a program and compile it, he has a chart, a figure. Great. Oh yeah, VI, because that's going to mean anything to a newbie. They're not even going to know that's the same thing as Vim you mentioned earlier. I mean, maybe they'll infer it from this edit source compile fuckery, but this doesn't mean anything to a new person. They don't know, like, errors. Like, you haven't even told them that the compiler is going to tell them if they did something wrong and report errors. Oh, no, he does it, like, right there. But, okay. But still. Link means nothing. Hasn't covered any of this. Doesn't cover any of this. So I guess this is just like a series of visual prompts for explaining these different... Like, why are you explaining the compiler pipeline before you show them how to compile a single program? You haven't shown them how to just make the computer print stuff. Why would you do this? It is crazy. Oh, of course he covers language development environments. Yeah, sure, send an Xcode. Oh my god, have you ever watched a new person try to figure out how to, like, work on, like, a basic C tutorial in Xcode if they've never used Xcode before? It's fun. Alright. Visual Studio is a little bit easier, but ugh, they should just be using a text file. He's talking about language interpreters, and he's not teaching a language that really has interpreters that people actually use. There was the one by CERN or something that was supposed to be like a validated interpreter or something. Nobody uses any of that. So why are you talking about language interpreters? Why are you talking about Shell and Python? They're not... This is a C book. You're talking about Python and the fact that it's interpreted before you've shown them how to do Hello World in C in a C book. Oh, we have to get to chapter 2 before we... Okay, we have to get chapter 2 before we get to compile something. Alright. Okay. What the fuck? Oh, man. This just has, like, zero empathy for the reader. Like, I don't... maybe it'll get better now. We're out of the woods. We're out of the woods. It'll get better now. Alright. Introduced to the... these introductory sentences that they have in all these books, it's, what do we do in our... Okay, so we usually do the quotes, right? We always do the quotes. And it's usually related... It's basically always related to the chapter, these quotes. And then... Yeah, so in the basic data types chapter, we say Haskell has a robust and expressive type system. Types play an important role in the readability, safety, and maintainability of Haskell code as it allows us to classify and delimit data, thus restricting the forms of data our programs can process. Okay, so this is this sentence has a problem of aboutism, and I hate aboutism. So aboutism is when they say what the chapter is about. And he says what the chapter is about because the editor asked him to write a sentence saying what the chapter was about. Instead of actually saying something descriptive that would further their understanding of what it is he actually is going to convey in the chapter, because you can actually just write a more general sentence of what it is you want to talk about, still be conveying novel information, and it'll act as an introduction to what you're talking about. When a here, look at a fucking newspaper. New York Times. Okay? Alright. Trump now says he backs deal to protect Dreamers. Okay, do you see a sentence in here that says, in this news article, we're going to talk about how President Trump is going to support law to protect Dreamers? They don't say that, like it's in the title, right? You know? And then they just start with the basic framing facts, and then they drill down as they go down, right? The chapter has already told us what it's going to be about. The title's right there. Compiling and running your first program. And if you click it, you'll even see the sections to know how they're going to break that down. You don't need an about sentence. This is like a middle schooler standing awkwardly at the class dance for homecoming. They can't dance, so instead they just kind of fidget in the corner. This sentence is fidgeting in the corner. It's so bad. Okay. What better way to gain an appreciation for this language than by taking a look at an actual... Oh my god. A lot of the people reading this haven't programmed before, or they only barely know like one other programming language. You can't gain an appreciation for what a programming language is like by just looking at some code. I mean, a beginner will see something. They're going to see some code, but it doesn't mean a lot to them because they haven't been taught what any of it means, and they don't really necessarily know how it relates to anything else. So how would you gain an appreciation for the language? It's like showing a monolingual Anglophone a medieval French poem saying it exemplifies how beautiful medieval French is. They don't even have a context in which to interpret what you're showing them, let alone getting like the warp and woof of medieval French to appreciate what makes this particular medieval French pretty. You know, they don't know what the fuck you're talking about. This chapter is short, thank God. Writing your first C program. Alright, this is our hello world. Include standard I.O. Int main void, printf, return 0. Alright. Did it. Okay. This is interesting. So I'm not going to ding them for this. My initial impulse was to ding them, but I'm not going to. And what I'm talking about is, so they bother to explain that lowercase and uppercase letters are distinct. They don't bother to include, like, they've bothered to include jargon, but they don't bother to mention the very, very common programmer term, case sensitive, which really should be mentioned if you're going to bother to have a sentence like this, because if you include the programmer jargon for something... Okay, here. Let me Google this, okay? The first result is about typography and writing distinctive letters, right? So if a newbie searches this, you know, you have to remember, some of the people reading this book, they aren't native English speakers, right? What if they don't know what lowercase and uppercase letters are distinct means? To them, that sounds like, if you're not a native English speaker, that's tautological. It is necessarily true that lowercase and uppercase letters are distinct. They are distinct. Everybody knows an uppercase letter A isn't the same thing as a lowercase letter A. So why is he saying this? Why is he saying this? Oh, and yeah, Texas, you mentioned, I'll ding them for not using syntax highlighting in their PDF version. Yeah, because they use the exact same file for the print version as they did for the PDF, whereas in our book, let me find an example, we have syntax highlighting in the PDF because it's not printed. And it's really easy to just turn the syntax highlighting on and off. We just have different builds for it in our make file. It's not that hard. Anyway, lowercase and uppercase letters are distinct. Like, seriously, take that take that little, like, phrase, swish it around, you know, like you're tasting wine. What does that mean? Why is he saying that? What would it mean to a new person? What would it mean to somebody who doesn't speak English natively? I have an answer for you. It means fuck all. Here's what's happening. Mr. Graybeard remembers the good old days of terminals only having text, not necessarily upper or lowercase, and effectively it was just uppercase text, you know, like DOS, like DOS, prompt, all, uppercase, I am robot. Yeah, that whole deal, right? So he remembers that. He remembers, hey, C isn't like that, not realizing that anyone, almost anyone except for George R.R. Martin, is not going to need to be told this. Unless you're George R.R. Martin and still write your books on a DOS computer, you don't need to be told lowercase and uppercase letters are distinct. In fact, this is just going to confuse people. You could just improve this book right now by deleting this. Just fucking delete it. It means nothing. If you want to mention case sensitivity, fine. But the problem is he used the phrase lowercase and uppercase letters are distinct. Somebody who doesn't speak English very well searches that, they get typography. If you search case sensitive, it actually gives you the computing definition of case sensitivity. And it explains what it is. And they can find a bunch of explanations of what it means. But because he didn't use actually useful jargon that would help somebody research something further, they're stranded on his bad wording. Careless. In addition, see, it does not matter where on the line you begin typing. You can begin typing your statement at any position on the line. Okay, so several problems here right away. In addition, it does not matter where on the line you begin typing. Okay, so kind of true, except he hasn't explained delimiters that make that possible. So that's only true insofar as you know how to use semicolons. He hasn't explained lines, actually. Like, he never bothers to mention text files, because I don't know why. But then he doesn't explain line and column. Because, and you actually kind of need to, because Word documents don't really... They don't really make, like, a grid of text obvious, right? When you use, like, a more programmery text editor, or even, like, a plain text editor, like gedit or something like that, relatively plain anyway, you know, it's like, it treats the text like a, you know, like a grid or an array of text, right? So the, like, line and column thing, you know, somebody will probably intuitively understand it if you just mention it or explain it to them. Or they'll just figure it out naturally by typing in the programs, which is what Zed has people do. He just says, nah, fuck it, I'm not going to go through and try to explain all this shit. I'm just going to have you type in programs and compile them, which I think is better. But if you're going to bother to explain something like it does not matter on the line where you begin typing, then, you know. And another problem is he doesn't tie this back to the source code he's talking about. He just makes like this vague statement. He doesn't actually, like, what he's talking about, I think, is just the indentation. I think that's what he's talking about. Except this program here, he's not explaining that this is indented. Right? He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, hey, in addition in C, it doesn't matter where in the line you begin typing. He doesn't like show you like, hey, printf could be here, and it could be there, and it could be there, and it could be there, it could be there, you know, that kind of thing. Like, he doesn't say that. He doesn't even give you a counterexample of what isn't an example of it does not matter where on the line you begin typing. Because what if the newbie misunderstands and puts this printf after the return? You told them they could just put it anywhere, right? What if they misunderstand you? He doesn't give them a counterexample. He doesn't give them a positive example, and he doesn't give them a negative example. And you have to work in positive and negative space when you're telling people things like that. You can't just, like, make an assertion and be like, figure it out, asshole. Like, what? Come on. Oh, it gets worse. Wow. Okay. This fact can be used to your advantage in developing programs that are easier to read. He doesn't show them what he's talking about. They don't know why this makes it easier to read. He doesn't show them what he's talking about. They don't know why it makes anything easier to read. Then he says tab characters are often used by programmers as a key to indent lines. He hasn't explained what indent is. He hasn't explained indentation. He hasn't tied indentation back to the code. He hasn't explained what a tab character is. He hasn't explained the alternative space characters, right? He hasn't explained the alternative. He hasn't explained what a tab character is. I mean, tab character to, you know, somebody who isn't a programmer, I mean, they're, you know, this thing. They don't understand that as a character. They understand it as a key. They're going to think he, like, typos or something. Like, what? This is just upsetting me. I shouldn't be doing this. Alright, compiling your program. Returning to your first C program, you first need to type it into a file. Any text editor can be used for this purpose. Unix users often use an editor such... You're a fucking asshole. Don't tell people that. If they don't already know VI, and he also hasn't mentioned that VI is the same thing as the Vim he mentioned earlier. These people might think there's just two different text editors. One named VI and one named Vim. They're actually really the same thing. I don't know, like, what... Anyway, now he's introducing Emacs, and he's not actually spelling it correctly. I'm pretty certain it's capitalized. So that's cool. He's just typing in, like, command line invocations. That's not the actual name of Emacs. Or Vim. I think Vim gets capitalized, too. I need to send this guy, like, an MLA handbook. No, I need to send his editor an MLA handbook. Proper nouns, people. Proper nouns. Alright, C compilers recognize file names that end in two characters. Okay. Are we going to get file extension? Are we going to get the word extension anywhere? Nope. Doesn't look like it. Dang. You know, it's kind of a shame because a lot of people are going to know what a file extension is, and they're not going to be certain if, you know, like, you know, a user might say, well, I know, like, what a .app or a .exe is. Is this the same kind of dot? He could just reassure them. He could relieve their burden if he just told them, and by the way, if you've seen files that have a dot and then a few characters after them, that's a file extension. Same kind of thing. Here's some other examples of file extensions, like .doc, .pdf that you are reading right now. Yeah? I realize some operating systems hide the file extensions these days, but some users surely had to have seen them. Come on. So assume you type program 2.1 into a file called prog1.c. Okay. Assume. Yeah. Assume. Or you can just tell them they need to type it into a text file. Like, just, like, okay, this is program 2.1, right? But now he wants them to put it into prog1.c. Why don't you just skip the pointer in direction, see what I did there? And just put prog1.c right the fuck there. Just, like, right there. And then you could just refer to prog1.c. There you go. Now you don't have to dereference the pointer in between. Again, I'm betting that's an editor thing. Okay. Using the GNU C compiler. He doesn't tell you how to install that or anything. Kind of cute. Zed Shaw's book tells you how to get stuff installed, by the way. This could be as simple as issuing the gcc command at the terminal, followed by the file name like this. gcc prog1.c. Okay. Sure. It's fine. If you're using the standard Unix C compiler, the command is cc instead of gcc. There is no standard Unix C compiler. There is no such thing. It doesn't exist. CT is just an alias for GCC most of the time. If you're using BSD, it might be an alias for Clang. Usually it's just GCC, though. Or Clang. That's it. He's probably... Newbies are going to think he's referring to some other compiler. Maybe he means like standard Unix way to invoke the primary OS C compiler. CC is just a way to say like, hey operating system, what's your default C compiler? Let me go ahead and use that. You know? Like, just say that. The standard Unix C compiler, not a thing. Not a fucking thing. Not a thing. There is no standard Unix C compiler. Doesn't exist. Here the text you typed is entered in bold. Well, at least you explained that. Some people would actually type the $sign in. The $sign is your command prompt. This is the first time he's mentioning a command prompt. He didn't explain that in any of the other times he was making oblique references to invoking this program. This is the first time he's referencing the command prompt. That is special. Your actual command prompt might be some characters other than the $sign. You're not going to give some examples? No? Alright, that's fine. That's actually fine. I don't think anybody's obligated to like show somebody every possible example. It would be nice though if like, so he said command prompt. He could have said that the $sign was the prompt in the word term command prompt, right? Like it's the prompt, as in it prompts you to begin typing a command, because until that shows up, you have not been prompted for user input. That's why it's called the prompt. Here, case in point, I fire up a terminal. Until my prompt here renders, it's not ready for user. Okay, my prompt's kind of fast right now. Sometimes it's slow, though. Bear with me. Here. Let me go somewhere slow. What's a really fat Git repo I have? Anyway, yeah, you get the idea. Okay. If you make any mistakes keying in your program... Oh, now he wants to talk about typing. Except instead of saying typing, he wants to say keying. Keying in your program. Keying. What do I get if I search keying in your program? I get master lock, GM or Chevy transponder chip key, chroma key software for live streaming, instakeysecurityrecords.com, chroma key again, keyhead transmitter, green screen software, which is also chroma key at work, employee solutions. This man has a real fetish for idiosyncratic vocabulary, and he needs to stop. Keep your folksy bullshit for the office. Like, if you're going to write a book, Okay, now if I say typing in your program, okay, touch typing, learn to type, typing software programs, okay, not ideal, but better, closer. Doesn't know I'm talking about a software program in that Google search, so. Compiler lists them after you enter the GCC command, typically identifying the line numbers from your program that contain the errors. This is so fucking lazy. Oh my god. He doesn't show you an example of what he's talking about. So I'm going to go to Hello Haskell here, and in our book, and let me see if I can find an example here. Troubleshooting. So we actually go through like examples of common mistakes people might make, and we talk about troubleshooting as an explicit thing that you'll need to do sometimes. We talk about the kinds of errors and what causes them. We talk about why it doesn't work. We tell you how to fix them, and we show you what the errors actually look like in a REPL. You know, code/learn.hs 10.1 parse error on input, right? If you made this error, you will see this. So a user can actually reproduce the error, see that they got the same error, fix it, and understand how to fix a basic syntax error. I mean, this is just telling them to go fuck themselves. That's what this is.
Unbelievable. Put in 3 pages of Wikipedia definitions, but he can't put in a simple example of a typo and how to fix it. Again, Zed Shaw does a better job here. Using the GNU or there is no standard C compiler. There is no standard C compiler. There's only GNU CC, Clang, Visual Studio, the VCC, VSCC, whatever. There's others. There's the Intel C compiler. There's not a standard C compiler. Anyway, it says this program is called AOut by default. All right, I'm actually curious if that's the case anymore. So let's find out. Kochan, part1.c, root.io, main void, and he uses the weird braces, but again, that's super unimportant. It's fine. Putting a space in between the function and the parens is pretty weird, though. It's pretty unusual. Alright, so GCC, prog1.c. I'm going to type it exactly the same way we did. Okay, it was a.out. Programming. Alright. Out -o. Okay, so another problem. He mentions a potential problem where you could get a.out, no such file directory, and then he says, then it probably means the current directory is not in your path. You can either add it to your path or type the following at the command prompt. Alright. So that's a good problem to highlight, but it's out of order. So here's what a beginner is going to do. They're eventually going to figure out how to fire up a command prompt. They're going to be here. They're going to try gcc prog1.c, not know where it is. Now, they don't know how to use a terminal. They don't know how to get to where their text files are. They don't know where they necessarily save them. They're not going to know how to do ls, pwd, or cd. Right? Not going to know how to do those things because you didn't tell them. So they're stuck. This is going to mislead them, think that this is their problem somehow, because what does it say? No such file or directory. But it's actually a different problem. He's talking about a pathing problem. This is just you're in the wrong directory problem. So you need to go to where the code is. Now, we go to the next problem. What he did here is a completely unnecessary potential problem. You know how he can just cut this if he just did the /a.out here. If you just do that, this isn't even a problem. It just goes away. Won't ever happen to anyone. Very few people use the current directory in their path to avoid mistakes and problems. Most people don't do that. They almost always use the // these days. There's no reason to do that. Just put the / there. Lazy. Lazy, lazy, lazy. All right. Does the same thing here. Doesn't type // does prog1. Okay. Understanding your first program. Take a look at your first program. The first line of the program. Okay. So another problem here. This guy uses the word program for a bunch of different things, right? He uses it for the source code. He uses it for the executable. He uses it for a lot of things. Be more precise. Understanding the code. Trying to understand the code. All right. Should be included at the beginning of just about every program you write. Maybe if you're a beginner, it's not always going to be relevant. It tells the compiler information about the printf output routine. Okay, this is that oblique way of writing he has again. it tells the compiler information about the printf output routine that is used later in the program. Okay, all right. It is useless. Here's what you do. Make them do that. Make them do that. Show them what happens when they forget standard I/O. So that when it happens, because it will, they'll know what it looks like, they'll know how to fix it, and they'll know what it means. After you've shown them what it looks like when it breaks, and how to fix it, then you say, if you want to be able to use functions like printf, you need to include them from standard I/O. This weird, oblique, it tells the compiler information about the printf output routine. I mean, I think what he's getting at is a function prototype, just like a type signature, but there's no... Why allude to things you're not going to explain for 10 fucking 11 chapters? 10 chapters, 10, 11 chapters. Chapter 12, the preprocessor. So he's not really going to explain any of this in detail. What any of this means, 11 chapters out. So why not just tell them the thing that's actually relevant to what they need to know, which is that printf isn't in scope unless you include this. They need to know what scope is and how it works right now. They don't need to know what the preprocessor is right now. All right. Line of the program that reads int main void. Ooh boy, I know people who could really dig deep into this one better than I could. But let's just run with it. Inform system, the name of the program is main? What? What? What does that mean? What? That's not... What? No. The name... Okay, so the line of the program, he's talking about source code here. The line of the source code that reads int main void informs the system. Again, system, not defined, not well defined, not, what's the system? Informs the compiler, the operating system, the file system. Which system? What is he talking about? I honestly don't know. I think he means the compiler. But how would I know? He doesn't use a more specific noun than the system. I should make a parodical tech book where it just refers to every technical noun as a system. The system talks to the system with the system. Just, come on. The name of the program, I don't know what the fuck this means. I honestly, is he still talking about source code here? What's program? Is that the source code? The source code's a fucking file. The file has a file name. The name of the file is not main. The name of the file is not your main function. It's a fucking function. It's a function, a procedure, I guess, if you want to be more precise. And that returns an integer value. Not that he's bothered to define returns at all. Integer value, which is abbreviated int. Main is a special name. He doesn't explain the parens here. He keeps using the parens. Doesn't explain them. I think newbies are going to think that the parens are actually part of the name of main. And it's not. It's just main. The parens are a reference to function invocation that he's using erroneously here. He only gets to call it with empty parens because it's a void main. This is infuriating. Okay. Special name. Yeah, alright, no objections there. That indicates precisely where the program is to begin execution. Okay, so the last half of this sentence got close to being useful. Special name is fine, begin execution is fine. Program. We're back to program now. The program. The program? Do you execute source code? No? Where do you begin execution? When do you begin execution? Is it one of those interpreter things you mentioned earlier with Python? Is this like Python? What are we doing here? He probably means the executable, the a.out. Does he say a.out? Does he say executable? Does he say the actual program you run? Well, he does say program, but the problem is he's already polluted the word program. So now I don't know what he means anymore, because he's using program for everything. Everything's either a program or a system in this book. The opening close parentheses immediately following main, parent, that's going to drive me crazy. Specify that main parent is the name of a function. Oh, nice. We're on functions now. This means it's functional programming, right? The keyword void is enclosed in the parentheses, specifies that the function main takes no arguments. That is void of arguments. Okay, doesn't bother to mention that this keyword is the same as int. He also doesn't... Okay, so void is a type. Int is a type. He calls void a keyword. It's not... I don't think void's actually a keyword. I think it's a type name. Because int isn't a keyword. It's a type name. Right? So I think he's actually wrong here. It's not a keyword. And it's also the same kind of thing as int, I'm pretty sure. Right? Am I wrong about that? Here, C keywords. C keywords. Okay. I guess basic types like int and void are considered keywords. Alright, but he also doesn't say int is also a keyword. He just says integer value is abbreviated int. He doesn't say int is a keyword that signifies an integer value. He could have said that. But he didn't. So. Okay. Also, this is actually kind of funny. That is void of arguments. Fine. Whatever. Amuse yourself, man. I know you really enjoyed writing that. Just try to enjoy the process. It's clearly not about the reader at this point. These concepts are explained in great detail in Chapter 7. Yeah, I'm sure they are. If you're using an ID, go fuck yourself. I'm not even reading that. Alright, now that you've identified main parent to the system, you are ready to specify precisely what this routine is to perform. This is done by enclosing all program statements of the routine within a pair of curly braces. He doesn't have them anywhere. He says curly braces. He doesn't actually show you what they are. He doesn't show you where they were in the program. He just says they were in there. He doesn't say what enclosing is either. He doesn't explain what enclosing is. He doesn't demonstrate an example of something enclosed by curly braces and something not. You don't really have to go into that much detail, but my point is, like, I would prefer, if it were my book, I would prefer to just say, like, hey, curly braces, they enclose a thing. You see this from our previous program? You remember that? Here you go. Curly braces, enclosing, printf, and return 0. And then maybe add, a little something extra and say, these braces, put little text arrows next to them, they enclose this, they do not enclose this. Enclosing is, open, everything is enclosed until close, right? Doesn't do any of that. Just says, curly braces, they enclose things. You've seen it before. I'm not going to tell you where. We got to keep an air of mystery about this. But you've definitely seen it before. He also doesn't bother to include them syntactically anywhere here. Like, they don't actually know for certain what characters he's talking about. Now, if you're a programmer, you know he means these, right? These little guys. Our old friends, the mustaches. But a newbie would not know that. Not necessarily. TextEU makes a good point. He doesn't bother to define what a keyword is either. And actually, you could do something kind of cool with that. You could actually show them how, if you have a procedure and you try to name it, a keyword, it doesn't work because it parses this. Here, let me do this. I want the parser to assume it has the return type instead of that. Oh, that's funny. Can I just like keep feeding this? Interesting. So it'll just keep like parsing these and accumulating them forever. That is fascinating. Huh. What was Clang? Oh, Clang slow? Alright, Alright. Yeah. This is a much better type error. Because this one is just like parsing. Oh no, it says 2 or more data types. Hold on. Let me chop this down. Yeah, so this is interesting. So the first error is 2 or more data types and declaration specifiers, but a newbie is going to fixate on the most recent error that got printed, which is going to be that guy, and they're going to get confused. Clang gives better errors here, I think. I mean, there still could be mystifying, and there's a little bit more noise, but I think it's actually a little bit better. Let's see how it handles the single case. Yeah, it just chomps the type name. It's just because it assumes you've got a return type of int, and it's just waiting for the identifier, but you didn't give it one. So anyway, the point is you can explain keyword. And then you can demonstrate how, if you don't name it something. Types are missing, defaults to int. Yeah, that's fine. Now you've identified main parent. You're ready to specify precisely what this routine is to perform. This done by include, yeah, the curly braces. I remember you. Statement specifies that a routine named printf is to be invoked or called. Well, the parameter or argument to be passed to the printf routine is the string of characters. Programming is fun. Yep, alright. Printf routine is a function in the C library. It doesn't bother to tie that back to the include standard IO, by the way. Printer displays its argument or arguments on your screen. The last 2 characters in the string, namely the backslash and letter N, are collectively known as the new line character. Doesn't I'm not going to nitpick the escape characters. I'm not going to go there. This is the second chapter. I'm not going to climb up his ass about that. It's not worth it. Any characters to be printed up to the new line character that appear on the next line of display. In fact, the new line character is similar in concept to the character trinket on a typewriter. Okay. How many of you have used a phone that had an actual like touch, the little like spin dial, where you had to like stick your finger in a hole, rotate it around to the stop, and then let it go, and then do it. Yeah, okay. So there are very few people learning to program right now. Yeah, rotary telephone. I've used those before when I was younger. All right. There are very few people alive now that are learning to program that have used either a typewriter or a rotary telephone. Any analogy to a rotary telephone or a typewriter is a waste of time. Nobody knows what a character return key is or does. I've used a typewriter, so I understand what he's trying to say, but it's not going to help people. It's not going to help. So why bother? Mr. Folksy strikes again. All right. Stephen Folksy Kochan. All right. All program statements in C must be terminated by a semicolon. Program! Again! My old nemesis. Still don't know what the fuck you are. All right. Statements. Don't know what that is. Based on what he said in the book so far, there's no fucking way I know what a statement is. I know he's explained it a little bit earlier, but I don't know what a statement is. And I certainly don't know what a statement is well enough to know when I'm supposed to terminate it with a semicolon. I don't know when I'm supposed to do that. I don't know what and where a statement begins and ends. Why can't I just write one long statement? I don't know. He doesn't explain. Live to Create asked, when do you usually stream? Do you have a schedule or just random? God, I wish I had a schedule. So the problem is I am working on Lorepub and finishing a book right now. This stuff takes priority, and I will stream myself working on that stuff. Sometimes I'll stream myself working on side projects in Rust. The problem is the book stuff takes priority, and some of that work has to happen privately. I can't stream it. And in those cases, I just need to get work done. And that means that I can't commit to a schedule because I don't know when I'm going to actually have time to stream. When my time kind of more belongs to me, maybe 6 months from now, 3 months from now, 2 months from now, somewhere in there, I'll be able to stream more regularly, maybe even commit to a schedule. But as it stands, the only thing I'm actually on a schedule for is lifting strength training with my friends. That's it. That's the only thing I'm really on a schedule for. No, that and Pathfinder. I do Monday Pathfinder with a friend. But that's it. But yeah, it means that basically I have to gap fill all my other days with just working on whatever needs done. And I just can't always stream that. So, sorry. I'm only reviewing this book on my Twitch because, which it'll eventually get uploaded to YouTube. I'm only reviewing it because people keep asking for a C book, so I'm reviewing a C book. I don't feel like I'm going to actually recommend this book by the time I'm done here tonight, but, you know, do what you got to do. All right. All right, where were we? Program statements terminated by a semicolon. This is the reason for the semicolon that appears immediately following the closing parenthesis of the printf parent call. Okay. He really likes putting the parents, like, he can't just call a procedure by its name. He has to always put the parents there. You're already using typewriter text. Like, look, the text is monospaced. Surely people know you're referring to a function named printf, and not some new cool English word that happens to be spelled printf. Is the monospace not enough? Why do you do this? Alright. Last statement of main parent that reads return 0 semicolon. It says to finish execution of it. Does it actually say? Return to the system a status value of 0. Okay, so problems here. Problems. Okay, so he's referring to a bit of syntax that is universal to procedures in C. Returning things is a very common thing to do in C. I feel comfortable saying that. I feel like I'm not unusual for saying that. The fact that this returns to the system a status value of 0 is a special particularity of main. It is not a property of return. It's just that this particular procedure with a special name, its return value, when the program exits, is returned to the system and is special. But he doesn't say any of that. He doesn't say any of that. So people just think like return always goes to system or something. Like, I don't know how a newbie would know the difference. Why would they know like what it is that makes it return 0 to the system? They're going to think it's return because he says return to the system a status value of 0 after he just talked about return, when it's actually predicated on main, not return. but he doesn't say that. You have to like anticipate how people are going to misunderstand something. And if you can't figure out how to write it in a way that avoids the potential misunderstanding, you have to explicitly confront the potential misunderstanding and say, this is not what we mean. We mean this. You know? And he also, yeah. You can use any integer here. He doesn't explain what that means. It's also not strictly speaking true. You cannot use any mathematical integer here. You can use any integer that's a valid int. And an int is not a mathematical integer. It is a subset of mathematical integers. 0 is used by convention. I mean, sometimes. Used by convention to indicate the program completed successfully. That is without running into any errors. You haven't even explained what any of that would look like. Different numbers can be used to indicate different types of error conditions that occurred. The X status can be tested by their program, such as a Unix shell. I can definitely tell this guy wrote a Unix shell book. I don't think I'm going to buy it at this point, though. Now that you've finished it... Oh, we're finished analyzing our first program. Really? That's unfortunate, because I don't think a beginner would actually feel like they understood their first program. Why would they understand what was going on based on that explanation you gave? Whew. Okay. You can modify it to also display the phrase, and programming in C is even more fun. Okay. So this is a pattern of extension, and this is a good pattern. This is good. Like, reuse something they already did, extend it, modify it, break it. That's the thing a lot of writers don't do. They don't break examples to show you how things can go wrong. They only show you the good thing. Again, I'm a broken record here. I don't actually think his book is perfect, but Zed Shaw's Learn C the Hard Way does a much better job here. Okay. Output. Programming is fun. Programming in C is even more fun. Okay. Wow. If you think programming in C is fun, then I want the book you learn C with. Probably K&R. Yeah, that's probably K&R. Displaying multiple lines of output. Okay. That's a somewhat misleading name. They are displaying multiple lines of output right there. Already a thing. That is multiple lines of output. I don't think there's any way in which you can construe this as not multiple lines of output. 2 lines. 2. Multiple. Displaying multiple lines of output. Okay, so we're going to talk about what he actually means again. He doesn't mean multiple lines of output. He means multiple lines of output in a single printf invocation. By using the new line character more than once. That's what he actually means. And he doesn't bother to explain it at all. It's just like code and output. That's cool. Great. Good work. That's going to confuse a newbie too. They're going to try to understand why this isn't multiple lines of output and why this one is. They have no idea what's special about this because he didn't bother to say. So they at least get an example to work with in terms of how to do multiple lines of output given a single printf, but they're not going to know what he means or what the purpose of this is. What time is it? I'm getting tired and grumpy. 10:48. Alright. Well, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to take questions. There's a few people, not many, but there's a few people watching the stream right now. If you have any questions you want to ask me about C programming, Haskell, books, anything like that, I'd be happy to answer some questions and get my mind off of this review. And if you don't have any questions, then I'll probably just poke through a little bit more of this book and then call it a night after showing everyone my dogs and how they're doing, because I do it at the end of most streams. All right. Kamatana asks, what are the most challenging aspects of C? Hardest to master. So that's a really good question. I feel like I may have talked about this a little bit earlier, but I don't really remember what I said. So I'll just kind of just go with what's in my head, and hopefully people won't mind any repetition or overlap. So there's a few things. So the first big hurdle people run into, the notorious famous hurdle in C, is pointers. And they have a hard time with pointers because the indirection confuses people. Because instead of just having a value, you instead have a value that points to the location and memory of the actual value of a particular type, right? So if you have just a car value, it's just this value that represents a single character. But if you have star car, you have pointer to car, and you don't actually have your character value until you've dereferenced the pointer, which is like a way of saying go to address, and then you're at the car value, right? If you try to interpret the pointer as a car value, it'll actually give you an incorrect program, right? So that's an earlier thing. That's not the hardest to master. I apologize. I mentioned that, but it doesn't actually get to your question. But it is like a very common sticking point. People have a really hard time with it. But the thing is it kind of is one of the hardest things to master in the sense of like using pointers correctly and safely. Because almost all of the security problems and the problems with writing correct C code basically boil down to pointers. And one of the reasons I like writing systems code in something like Rust is that it just eliminates that whole category of problems. Let's move on to a more advanced thing. Taxi, you mentioned this, and I think it's a good thing to talk about. So, undefined behavior in C is some people really struggle with this because it's pretty difficult to learn C idioms, to learn the patterns and things like that, because they're not super obvious sometimes. And there's sometimes like a lot of code kind of undergirding those patterns. But what makes it worse is a lot of those idioms and patterns, they'll actually rely on not being valid C code. They'll have undefined behavior in them. So the thing to understand about C is that C is a language defined by a standard. And it tells you what can be an interpretable C program and what can't be, right? Undefined behavior is kind of like that Chomskyan example. So undefined behavior is when you have a C program that is grammatically correct but not semantically correct. And Noam Chomsky's example is of a grammatical English sentence that doesn't make any semantic sense, if I remember correctly, is colorless green ideas sleep furiously. It's a grammatically correct sentence. It doesn't actually mean anything. Undefined behavior exists in a similar kind of space. Basically, whenever a compiler encounters undefined behavior, it's allowed to do anything it wants, up to and including deleting all the files in your computer, and then launching a nuke at Italy. Because the compiler author didn't like Italy. I don't know. It's allowed to do whatever it wants. So, the problem is you can trip over undefined behavior and not even know it. Compilers, if you turn on warning all, they'll sometimes warn you if you hit undefined behavior. You don't necessarily know you have, and the only way to really get over that, to stop making those mistakes and write valid C, is to really internalize the C standard. And that's hard. It's a big standard, and learning all the gotchas is hard. But if you're going to actually use C in anger, you don't have a choice. You don't have to do it all at once. Don't get me wrong. You don't have to do it all at once. But if you're going to keep doing it, and you want to write production stuff in C, then you're going to have to confront that at some point. Spoken 8 said, how do I find motivation to program? I'm the laziest fuck ever, and I'm a computer science major, second year, and I don't know any programming yet. I just started forcing myself to learn Python a couple days ago, and I was on fire, but now I'm losing interest again. What do? Yeah, wow. I don't know what to tell you, because when I was pretty young, so like 8 to 17, I would putt around with code a little bit, but I didn't really make a lot of progress. I learned a little bit of C and Common Lisp in those years. A little bit of .NET, but I didn't really learn that much. And I didn't learn that much because I couldn't really motivate myself to like really follow through anything. I had a hard time with that. So I know where you're coming from. Then I went hungry and I needed a job. And I spent about 3 months living on green tea and bananas because I couldn't really afford anything else. And I lost a bunch of weight. I was really poor. Wasn't sure where rent was going to come from. So I took a job basically writing tools in .NET to support the migration of database formats and file formats from old like IBM mainframes and stuff over to just kind of modern SQL Server databases and .NET applications. I was woefully underprepared for that job. But it made me aware of a few things. One, that I wanted to work as a programmer. I kind of had an inkling that I wanted to work as a programmer when I was younger, and I thought I could just kind of push off the responsibility of learning to program to going to school. But when I couldn't afford to go to school, I had to just kind of try to find a job, you know? And that was when the hungry winter came in. Anyway, so it made me aware that, you know, it was something I actually wanted to do, but it also made me aware that I just wasn't ready. I didn't know what I was doing. I was able to get some work done, but I was thrashing a lot because I was learning everything from scratch. And the boss was a fairly nice guy, but he wasn't super patient. And I got fired after like 3 months, I think, because I was slow. I was having to learn the program from scratch, and I was being put on super difficult tasks. Like the task I was on was essentially writing tools for reverse engineering of binary formats, you know, undocumented binary formats. You couldn't take most 10 and 15 year experienced web developers and put them on that, and most of them would fail out of that, let alone an 18-year-old who's broke and malnourished. Yeah. So I realized that I needed to be more ready if I was going to really make a career of it. So I lost that job, and for a year and a half, 2 years, I don't remember the exact span of time, I basically worked temp jobs at factories because I couldn't find another programming job for a long time, except for the occasional little bit of .NET work on contract. I basically wasn't able to find software work because I didn't have a degree, right? And I worked in factories, and I did just like menial labor. And eventually I got to New York City, and eventually I got a job doing Django and Python in New York City a few years later. And I had to learn a lot on the job still, but the previous experience had motivated me to spend a lot more of my time learning and programming and really immersing myself in programmer culture. So even though I didn't really know Python all that well, I knew a lot of other stuff a lot better, and I spent less time thrashing. So I still thrashed a lot. I mean, like, I had a really hard time with database stuff in particular because I was underprepared for that. So I had to learn how to, like, get MySQL installed, get the credentials set up for the Django application so it can talk to my local instance MySQL, get the migrations running so I can use the database models for our application, all that stuff. But the good news is, you know, after like 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks of learning, I was pretty productive. You know, I was able to start getting things done. And I was at the company for about a year and a half, and I started at a salary of $40K, living and working in Manhattan, which is, you know, I think most programmers would consider that poverty for programming in Manhattan. But the next job I got paid triple that. So it was a contract, but, you know, still triple that. So things got better. So, Smoking Eight suggested it was like a hard times make great men. I don't know about that. I was an irresponsible kid, and I got stimulated into growing up a bit. I don't know about great. I don't think simply learning and being prepared to do a job makes you great. For the record, I do these streams because it helps stimulate me into working. This is still something I have to like work with and manage and try to like help maintain good habits. It's not something that comes naturally. I've done a lot of work the last few years. You know, the book, worked on that for 3 years. The Julie, 1,200 page book, a lot of work, a lot of open source work, but you have to build up those habits, and you just have to not let yourself fall out. You don't want to burn yourself out either. You don't want to work so hard that you just, burn out. I've done that before too. The mainframe stuff job, that burnt me out real bad. I was super stressed out and burnt out. I couldn't code for a while after that. But you got to figure out something sustainable and just stick with it, and just figure out how to line up like challenges or tasks for yourself. One thing I would suggest is don't just decide on your own projects. Just follow exercises or practicum that other people set up and just knock them out. Because the less you have to come up with your own challenges, the easier it'll be for you to be consistent. Kamatama asked, did you ever have doubts about being able to make a living as a programmer? Yes, I absolutely did. And how did the factory world compare to the software world? Working in factories was much worse in a lot of respects, but it was also better in some respects. But the ways in which it was better were very minor, but they do stick with me. So one thing is that the people in factories are actually human beings. Programmers are really bad people. They're kind of socially dysfunctional. They're super hypersensitive to any offense you deal them, and yet they're super callous and insensitive to any offense they deal somebody else. I have never seen that kind of asymmetry in any kind of like social institution or culture ever. It is incredible how readily programmers will get offended while they're being a dick to you. It is incredible. In factories, you take it, you deal it. That's it. Like, there's a set level of shit talking. Everybody takes it, everybody deals it. Just how it goes. You just learn to banter, and as long as you can learn to banter and just kind of roll the punches and realize nobody's actually trying to hurt you, it's okay. Programmers will actually take things personally and want to hurt you. They will want to hurt your feelings. They'll want you to lose your job. They'll want you to, like, starve. It's fucking crazy. Like, that's, like, one of the most outstanding differences to me is that people in factories, they're just doing a fucking job. Programmers need to calm the fuck down. Okay. Texiu said, I similarly put off putting in the word for a long time. Yeah, I agree with Texiu. Texiu said, learning to create a goal and holding yourself responsible for that goal helps. I agree. I do think, like, especially earlier on, I think self-created goals, to the extent that you can fill them up with structure and exercises and practices created by somebody else, is going to be better. The less synthesizing of a plan you have to do as a beginner, the easier it's going to be. And like the easiest, best possible case is if your goal is something that you can buy an entire book for, and then you can just achieve your goal by working through the book. And I don't just mean Haskell book. I just mean that that's like kind of the spherical cow ideal scenario. Because then you don't have to plan anything. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to discover your next step. It's just you know what you need to do. You did up to this much content. You need to do the next thing. That's the best thing, because then you're not expending willpower and energy on what do I do next, which is a challenge even for me, even though I've been working as a programmer for almost 10 years. Any other questions? I took Kamatama's question in a particular direction. You might want me to talk about something else with regards to that question. If you do, that's fine. Just pipe up. If anybody else has questions, feel free to ask. Okay, I'm going to skip to Pointer's chapter.
has been allocated dynamically. Doesn't explain memory until like an appendix-ish chapter. Okay. Nice. Value. Pointer. Oof. Declaration of undefined value. Okay. Oh yeah, every C book has this damnable chart arrow box thing. They always do this, where you have like a pointer and then it's like, hey, a little arrow and it goes over here. And I think this is really misleading. It physicalizes it in a way that I think is kind of inappropriate. It's closer to something like something like that. I'm just kind of making it up as I go, but TechCU says, I wonder if there's a happy medium for learning how to manage willpower and consuming material for progression. I felt like I consumed a lot of material and got almost nowhere. Yeah. Excuse me. I'd always kind of thought of it in terms of clutch. Have any of you ever ridden a motorcycle or driven a manual transmission car? I'm going to explain it regardless, but I want to know if anybody's kind of on board with me for this analogy. I'm going to start explaining. Tell me if you have. Alright, so when you... I have the most experience with motorcycles. I'm not as good at cars. So when you ride a motorcycle... Yeah, Taxi knows what I'm talking about. Alright, cool. So when you need to pull away, like you're stopped at a light, when the light goes green, what you're doing on a motorcycle is you have the clutch in so that the engine isn't driving the chain or the drive shaft or whatever, however it is your motorcycle's built. Some of them have like a drive shaft thing, like the Yamaha V-Stars used to have, something like that. Anyway, what you have to do is your gas is off and your clutch is engaged. So what you have to do is gradually disengage the clutch, and as you're doing that, you need to bring the gas in and start bringing on the gas, right? And you have to kind of do it symmetrically, right? So you're kind of, same time. And as the clutch starts coming out, the gas kind of picks up the slack, and you pull away. And what Taxi is describing, where you learned a lot of, absorbed a lot of material but didn't really get anywhere, it's like you let off the clutch, but there wasn't any gas, right? So you do still have to let off the clutch, but you have to make certain you're kind of gradually moving into actually doing the thing it is that you want to do. And it doesn't really matter what that is. You don't really even know what you need to learn next material-wise unless you've tried and failed to learn some stuff. Not when you're a super beginner. When you're a super beginner, you really just want to kind of like get through the basics and just try to find the best resource for doing that and just get that over with. But once you start getting beyond the bare bones basics, yeah, you kind of have to start branching out a bit. When people go through the book, they will generally start doing projects anywhere from halfway to 2/3 of the book. But they won't necessarily leave the book permanently. They'll just kind of start playing around a bit, because at that point in the book we've shown them enough that they can start doing that. Sometimes they read further, sometimes they don't. As long as there's not a failure to launch there, I don't really
I mean, I do care how far they're reading the book, because I think, you're missing out on some of the best explanations and chapters if you don't get through at least Monad. Although I'd say the Monad Transformer stuff is really worth getting to, but, I'm biased. It's our book. But, a lot of people have been successful just reading up through, like, Monad, and doing those exercises. And then they start doing other projects, and then, they figure out Monad Transformers and stuff on their own. Maybe they leaf through the chapters we have on that in the book. But they don't necessarily do all the content sequentially from that point. And they do alright. But, you just kind of gotta start doing the thing you want to do. I've seen that happen to people in C. Actually, for many years I saw this happen. They would do introductory texts on C over and over because they didn't really feel confident in C. And what they really wanted to be doing in C was to do open source work, or read open source code, or contribute a patch. And what they didn't realize is that what they really should have been doing is following the example of somebody like Julia Evans, who just kind of, wants to do something, just dives in, just head first, She just goes for it. Does she get confused? Does she have to ask people questions and seek help? Yeah. And, she, by this point, when Julia Evans, dives into a project, like, she knows enough stuff that she can just, she has enough of the foundations and basics. She can kind of pull stuff together. But, so if you're a beginner, again, you do kind of want to, like, try to learn the programming language that you want to be using and just kind of get the basics of that down. But if your goal, is to, for example, just say for the sake of argument, if your goal is to be able to contribute a patch to the Linux kernel, then you should probably start moving on to resources about the Linux kernel. You should be reading Linux kernel source code. Rather a lot of it, actually, because one of the main complaints people will get when they submit a patch is it doesn't follow basic style guidelines in the Linux kernel. And the Linux kernel definitely has, like, a style and an approach to things that you need to follow, right? But you're not going to know that unless you read the code. So, read the code, particularly the code in the subsystem of the kernel that you want to work in. If you're interested in drivers, which, to be honest, isn't the worst place to start, go look at drivers for the kind of hardware you want to write a driver for. I don't know, what kind of drivers are easier to write than others. I have no idea, but, I have some idea. I mean, printers are evil, but, you just kind of got to start getting in there. And then we start reading some source code. You're not going to understand everything. It's going to be really confusing, but that's okay, because now you need to know. I don't understand this idiom, I don't understand this library, I don't understand this bit of C code. Now you have a checklist, you have a task list of things you want to know. And now you know what you need to do next, right? Don't get stuck in that beginner loop of, I don't feel confident, therefore I should reinforce the basics. I don't feel confident, therefore I should reinforce the basics. Don't get stuck in that loop. Go ahead and, get out of the nest. Go hunt something. I think that's about all I have to say about that. And people are enthusing about Julia Evans because she is a lovely person. Any other questions? I'll keep leafing through the pointers chapter, and in the meantime, that's a decent example. That's alright. That's a little iffy. I don't know if you should be telling people to do that, but, whatever. Okay, that's good. Like, reusing the same basic structure and then just changing the type, that's good. It's good that he does that. Texi is good. Kamatama asked, why are the resources for C so bad? Because every tech publisher feels like they need to have a book on C, even if they don't necessarily have a novel idea or a basis for how a text on C should be written. Again, citing the one personal example I have of this. I think the Haskell book turned out pretty well because I had been teaching Haskell. I wanted a resource that scaled better and worked better for people because I didn't really feel 100% happy or comfortable recommending the existing resources. I knew it didn't work. I knew what I was unhappy with. So I knew in what ways I wanted it to improve. So, yeah, you know, I was a man on a mission, right? I don't think most people go into writing a C book like that. It's just like a thing to do, you know? D. Navis cites the example of JS. Just, you know, everybody's just going to write a book. So, yeah, it's just like a super popular thing to publish a book on, and very few people have really spent much time trying really hard to like get good at teaching C. It's kind of unfortunate, actually, specifically with C. So the problem with C is that there are people who know the C programming language extremely well and that have a lot of experience teaching C. They're on the IRC channel. Used to be FNet, these days it's mostly Freenode. Here's the problem. The people in the C channel are fucking sociopaths, and they seem to mostly be there to abuse new people and play with them like a cat plays with their food. I don't know why they do this. I don't at all. I have no idea why the culture is like that, but it's incredibly toxic. And the problem is they do actually know a lot, and they actually do know how to teach C pretty well, but nobody wants to put up with that. And pretty much none of those people has written a book, as far as I know. Actually, one of the more notoriously evil people in that channel is a Google employee. I've always wondered how he survived there. You'd think at Google he would have gotten fired by now. It's really weird. Anyway, yeah, so there are people who have a lot of experience teaching C, but they're very often very bad people. I knew a couple of super experienced C people in IRC that were nice. One was a BSD user who did mainframe programming. One was just like a hobbyist. He'd actually never worked as a programmer. He'd just been a hobbyist for so long that he was really good at C. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to find a good book on C. I think Zed Shaw's has good pedagogy, but I would like to see something more advanced on C. That, you know, like gets into the more difficult things in depth that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, the JS community is more welcoming. I've been in the JavaScript channel before. It seemed okay, you know. No objections, but I haven't spent years hanging out in the JavaScript channel like I had in the C channel, so I can't really compare. Any other questions? Did you seriously rely on... Alright. Good old aliasing. Don't we just love aliased pointers? Yeah, I mean, this book covers more stuff than KNR and Zed's book, but it's kind of rough. So maybe I would recommend people do, I guess, Zed's book and then this one? I don't know. Man, I need to find a better follow-up. Comment Thomas said, you mentioned sequence points today on Slack. Yeah, I did. So it's part of the C standard. Sequence points are part of how you understand undefined behavior and why some things are undefined and some things aren't. Basically, a sequence point is something in the program that forces the compiler to not reorder things with respect to other sequence points. So, imagine I have some code that, does, I don't know, like that, and then say it does, okay, so let's say hypothetically I had something kind of like this. And to be clear, I'm not saying this is necessarily exactly how the sequence points would work in a C program, but let's say for the sake of argument that we have a sequence point here. And a second sequence point here. What that means is that the compiler is not allowed to do that. It can't reorder sequence points with respect to each other in the resulting program. So it can't do that either. The problem is assignment, if I remember correctly, isn't necessarily a sequence point. I think where a common thing where this bites people is if they have like plus plus some expression, whatever, I don't know, maybe v equals some other thing plus plus. And basically, you just can't rely on this stuff happening in a particular order. The compiler can reorder this however it wants, for the most part. Well, the data dependency means these will come after this. But if this is just some x, then these could go there, right? So the problem is people think that C programs have to occur in strictly the order they occur in the source code, and that's not actually true. They only have to follow the order of the sequence points, and it's just a way of it's just a stake kind of driven in the ground that says that this particular thing represents a sequential point of order in which the program has to obey. You'll see this come up a lot with like threaded programs where you have to be careful about sequence points so that something that has to happen in a particular order doesn't get reordered a particular way. You have to worry about a lot of stuff. That's what I'm referring to. I think if you search for C sequence point, yeah, there you go. There's a Wikipedia article for it. Yeah, so. And then it gives you examples. So, yeah, those are good examples. So, yeah, Wikipedia article covers it pretty ably, I would say. Any other questions? And let's see what time it is. All right. definitely done in the next 5 minutes. But you can ask me a question in those last 5 minutes. While I wait and see if we get a question, I am going to get the dog hose. Alright. This is Jack. He's my German Shepherd. Hello, Jack. It's a good boy. Yeah, good boy. This is Papuchon, my pit bull. He's my little mutt dog. You can ask a question before I'm done. I'll just keep petting the doggos meanwhile. Whoop. Hi. How you doing? Yeah? Yeah, me too. Doing good? That's a good boy. Good dog. Scratch. Scratch. Yeah. He likes ear scratches. Jack is super into getting his ears rubbed and scratched. Loves it. Absolutely loves it. In fact, he loves it so much that if I've pet him just kind of on the top of his head like that, and I don't, give his ears a bit of work, he'll actually just like smash his head into me and rub his ears on me until I give his ears some scritch. It's pretty cute. The problem is the dog knows he's cute. That's the problem. Alright. How you doing, other dog? Doing good? Yep. Hi. Oh. Hi. How you doing? Oh, God. Stop. Hi. How you doing? You doing good? Yeah, I know. Alright. I know. Stop. Alright, everyone. I'm going to call it a night. I want to thank everyone for joining me. Not enjoying. I hope you enjoyed it. Joining me on my little book rant today. And, yeah, thank you for the questions and for chatting and everything. Even if I don't necessarily reply to everything you're saying, I just want everybody to know it means a lot to me when people are chatting and talking, even if you're just talking amongst yourselves. I love it. It makes me feel like people are here with me while I'm getting worked on or reviewing something or whatever it is I might be doing. So, definitely love it. Y'all have a good night. You can find me on Twitter under the same name. So I'm Twitch TV Bite My App. Just, Twitter. Just replace twitch.tv with twitter.com. You can find me on Twitter if you want to ask me any questions. If you're a younger programmer, newer programmer, you don't even have to be young. Doesn't matter. And career advice, questions, anything like that, you can always just direct message me on Twitter or send me an email. Have a good night, everyone. Get some sleep. Everybody here is up late. I'm up late. You're up late. Get some sleep. Bye, everybody.